All right, so Jamie, 1999 and 2000, you'd grown up racing go-karts, and then I guess you moved to late models. 1999 and 2000, you drive for Mike Mittler in the truck series. How did you get hooked up with that deal?
So Mittler's from St. Louis, Missouri. I grew up in Joplin, Missouri, about 4.5 hours away from Mike. And I was racing locally at Lebanon, Missouri, Bolivar, Missouri, I-70, kind of running all of those tracks within Missouri on late models and modifieds. I'm trying to think. I must have been 18, 19 years old. And Mike had called my dad because they needed a driver for I-70 in the truck series. And my dad was like, that's a really good opportunity, but I don't think Jamie's ready to go do trucks yet. He's like, we're kind of running this late model, and he's like, I don't think he's ready for that. And as the story was told to me, Mike, told my dad, he's like, I really appreciate you being honest with me and not just throwing, Jamie at this. When you think he is ready, give me a call. And when, I was racing late models locally for the guy that actually, David Willard, that owned the tracks in Missouri. And when that was over, I wasn't real sure what I was going to do. And my dad called Mike, and I moved to St. Louis and started working on the trucks. And it wasn't full time. I think we maybe ran 10 races in 99. It's been so long, I don't remember, but started as just a part-time deal, and it was me and one other guy that worked at the shop, and we kind of did everything, along with some volunteer help that would come in after they would get off work, typical truck series stuff. And so, yeah, that got me my opportunity in one of the big three series at the time.
When did Bruco Motorsports and a move to the Busch series come into the picture?
Yeah, so I was driving Mike's truck, and I think I ran 5 races maybe in 99, and then in 2000 we ran 5 or 10 more races. And I was doing, not that I was running exceptionally well, but I remember going to Texas, and I believe we qualified 7th. And I ran 11th in the race, and we would have finished better, but we didn't have a pit crew. We just had a bunch of friends that helped. And we would come in the pits in 6th, 7th, and we would go out of the pits 11th or 12th every time, because that's how many cars were on the lead lap. And so, it opened up some eyes to people there. And there was a team, TKO Motorsports, that had pretty good equipment. They weren't like a factory team, but Dodge helped them a little bit, and they had really good trucks. And so I went from Mittler's to TKO Motorsports in 2000 and qualified on the pole at Michigan, my first race. I think I finished 5th. Went to the next race. I qualified on the pole again at Nashville. I don't remember where I finished. And we ran really well in that truck, and that opened up, because that happened in June or July. And that opened up all these opportunities where I talked to Bruco, CC Welliver at the time was a top tier Busch team. Hendrick Motorsports, they had this, I can't remember the affiliation with Herzog, but there was something going on there, and Jimmy actually ended up in that car. And so I talked to all these teams, and Bruco was the one that I chose. I thought it was pretty cool. Clarence Brewer sent a King Air airplane to pick me up in Lebanon, Missouri, and I've never been on a private aircraft before, and he schmoozed me with wealth. But I just, that got me the opportunity to go and drive for Clarence.
I know Clarence and Todd Wilkerson really well.
Yeah,
they've never schmoozed me. They've never sent a plane.
Well, they didn't
for
schmooze me after that ever again. That was the only time.
That first full-time year in the Busch Series, 2001, just from the cold hard numbers, it would appear that it was a little bit of a struggle. How hard was it to get your feet under you at that level?
It was really tough. And what I remember about that year is it was the year that Dale Earnhardt was killed at Daytona, and safety became a huge thing. The whole sport changed with the Hans device and with seats and headrest, and no one really knew what you needed, but everyone knew we were going really fast at these tracks and that you needed something different. And I always have been, I still am with my kids racing. Like I just always wanted the best seat that I could have. And what I remember about that year is that I think Clarence was going to let me go. Like things just weren't going very well. And they all thought that I was scared because I was so worried about seats and safety and seat belts. But it wasn't that I was scared. I just wanted to do it right. And
Right.
I have this OCD personality where I want everything to be perfect. And not every driver's that way. And I remember sitting in Clarence's office, and I don't remember the exact details because I haven't thought about it in 20 years. But I just remember, I think there was an option on my contract, and he was like, I don't think we're going to exercise this. And there was some concern there of are you scared? Is that why you're not doing well? Because I think we ran better at some of the shorter tracks than we maybe did the bigger tracks. But with the exception of like Daytona and Talladega, those just historically were always good tracks for me. And I don't remember what I said or why I ended up getting re-signed to come back the following year. But obviously the following year, kind of everything turned around and clicked for me. So yeah, 2001 was tough though.
It's interesting that you say that because you're definitely part of the new school. You were one of the younger guys coming up, and with all due respect to Dale and his memory, we all know the kerosene rag and Candy Ass's quote and all that kind of thing. So that really did establish a certain expectation.
Yeah, I mean,
if you're a real man, you'll get in that car and you won't even wear a helmet. You wear a T-shirt, you jeans, whatever. Just get in the car, shut up, and drive.
Yeah, I would just tell you that there was just a lot of discussion about, and honestly, I still don't know the real story of whether his belts tore. No one ever really shared that information. There were just a lot of meetings after that with NASCAR, and all of a sudden, NASCAR had these safety meetings where they would show video footage of cars that they had crashed with test dummies in them, and why seatbelts needed to be mounted a correct way. And I would tell you that in short track racing, there's still an issue today that people don't know. It's not that they don't want to do it correctly. It's that they're not educated on how to do it correctly. And the way that we mounted seatbelts pre-2001 was just barbaric. I mean, and there was, I don't even remember there being seatbelt options. There was I think Simpson. Honestly, that's all I remember. I remember Simpson seatbelts. And there was a set of them. Now you can get 5 point, 6 point. So you can get, there's all these different options, and there's a bunch of different manufacturers. There's different widths, and we've also learned how to mount them. But at the time, no one knew, and so they started educating us on why we need to do it a certain way. And then the seats became a big factor. The headrest became a huge factor. I don't know if you remember, but Jeff Burton was a part of developing a lot of that. And at one time, they had that massive right side headrest, and they called it a porthole because the headrest was so big that they had to cut a hole in the middle of it so you could see out of the right side of the car. But no one knew what was right or what was wrong. And I remember clearly buying one of those big, huge headrests, and you get in the car at the shop and you feel really safe. Well, then when I got to the track, I couldn't see out of the car. I couldn't see out the rearview mirror. Well, that's a terrible feeling. Like if you're just driving blind, you feel like. And so there was just a lot of development that went on with that, and I wanted to be a part of it because I wanted my car to be safe. It had nothing to do with. I don't know that I've ever been scared in a car prior to when it starts. I mean, when it starts flipping, you get a little scared, or when your tire blows out, you're like, I don't know how bad this is going to hurt. I just wanted to do everything right and make it the right way, and so it was interesting that the perception, from Clarence or from some of the guys at the shop was that I was scared, but it had nothing to do with that. I just wanted to do it right.
Did you get that sense from anybody else? Some of the old school guys elsewhere in the garage?
What's that?
Look at Jamie. He's the new
no,
kid.
I don't think so. I don't think anybody
he's nervous.
Knew. No, yeah. I don't think. I mean, because when you would go to the garage right after Daytona, they started developing, everyone had something different. And I just remember all the drivers, it didn't matter if you were old or young, everybody was walking around on like tech day, and you were just looking at what seat, what was RCR doing? What was everybody doing that was different? And there was a lot of discussion about it. So it was more of you'd show up to the track, and, especially for us, because we were in Kentucky, so you couldn't go to people's shops and look at it. You had to wait till you got to the track. But no, I mean, that whole year was just everyone trying to figure out, what should be the standard. And what we've learned since then is that there is no standard. It's different for everyone. There's, LaJoie still builds seats. They have carbon seats now. There's a million headrest options on a Hendrick seat that you can. I mean, it's driver preference, and that has just evolved over the years. But at the time, no. I mean, everyone had something different. Yeah.
You mentioned the fact that in 2002 you did start running a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
I think the results were kind of coming together, and eventually there was talk about you and Chip.
Yep.
I remember that vividly. Hey, Jamie's moving over to Chip's. What's the deal? How did the two of you first start talking?
Gosh, oh my God, I've drawn a blank on his name. Jim, who used to be like the head of PR for NASCAR.
Jim Hunter?
Jim Hunter.
Ah.
Yeah, Jim Hunter. I think he had went to Felix and said, you need to keep your eye on Jamie, and whether it was because I was young or I don't know. And I remember talking to Jim because he was just such a great guy. I mean, he was always in the garage. I mean, he was fun to be around, but I didn't have like a relationship with him at all. I just had spoken with him, and I had found out that Jim had went to Felix and had, I think, put my name on Felix's radar. And honestly, I don't know exactly how the Jim Hunter to Felix to Chip, how that all tied together. But I got a call. I hadn't won a race yet. I hadn't won a truck, Xfinity, or Cup race yet, but I was pretty consistent, and we were running well. And I had an agent, and I was at a Harris Teeter grocery store here I lived in Huntersville, and my agent had called and left me a voicemail when I was in the grocery store. I was in there shopping, and he called, and you remember the old Nextel phones? They had you could square people out. You remember that? There was a button on top, and that they referenced it as like squaring them out, which meant you just cleared their call. Well, he called, and I saw it was him, and I was in the grocery store, and I squared him out, and I saw he left me a voicemail. So I listened to it, and he was like, listen, I have really good news. I need you to call me right back. So I called him while I was in the grocery store, and he told me, he's like, Chip Ganassi's reached out. They want you to drive, the 42 car. They're starting a new team. Haviland's coming over, going to sponsor it. And I remember leaving my buggy in Harris Teeter and leaving because I wanted to go home and call, my mom and dad and everybody. Yeah. And
I got a call before they changed their minds.
Yeah, and tell them the news. And then I met with Chip, and Andy Graves was a huge part of that program at the time. We signed all that, and then it's crazy like how mental racing is, and when you get momentum on your side, because I signed that. I tested a couple of times in the 40 car. I think I remember going to Martinsville and testing prior to Charlotte. And we went to the Martinsville test, and Bobby Hamilton was there with Petrie, and I can't remember the exact details, but we were the fastest car at this test, and Petrie, I don't think Petrie told me the story later on. I don't think he was at the test, and the guys on Bobby's team were like, well, the 40 car was the fastest with Jamie McMurray driving it, and Petrie's like, what the hell? He's like, you guys need to get your stuff together. He's like, there's no way that guy's never won a truck or Xfinity Series race, and he's, how can he be faster? Well, the next weekend was Charlotte, and we won the race. Or 2 weekends later, no, the next weekend was Charlotte. We ran Talladega that weekend, and then the following weekend was Charlotte. And Andy was like, I had to eat crow because I was like, oh, yeah. I get it now. Yeah. But then, shortly after that, I won, I think, Atlanta in the Busch car for Bruco. We should have won Charlotte that same weekend that I won in the Cup car, and the engine blew up with not many laps to go. Won Rockingham, and it's just like everything I got in for the rest of the year, we're kind of a contender. Yeah.
What was Clarence and Todd's reaction?
Oh, yeah. So that didn't end the way I wanted it to end, because I told you that, Clarence wanted to get rid of me in 2001. And then when he re-signed me, I think it was like for 2 more years when they decided to re-sign me, because I'm assuming it must have tied in with a sponsorship deal or something. Because then when Chip came to me and wanted me to drive, I had a contract still with Clarence, and I needed to get out of that contract. Well, then Clarence wanted to charge me to get out of the contract, so I ended up having to pay Clarence. I don't remember. I don't know. It was $250,000 or $500,000. It was quite a bit of money, especially at the time. I didn't even have that much money, but I knew the opportunity with to go to Ganassi and to Cup was going to be what I wanted to do. And so I paid Clarence to get out of that. And I mean, Clarence was a businessman. I wasn't even mad, because I was just happy I had this opportunity, and I paid him his money and I moved on. Yeah.
How did you get word that Sterling was going to have to sit out, and that you were going to be his replacement?
Yeah. So I was going to do. I'm trying to think. So I think there was like 10 races left in the year when I signed and we made the announcement. And then I went to Kansas the next weekend, or I didn't go. I mean, I was already at Kansas for the Xfinity or Busch Series at the time on Saturday. I stayed over on Sunday to watch the Cup race because with the Ganassi team. Sterling gets in a wreck on the backstretch, but it's just a wreck. No one knows that he didn't even know he was hurt. But he goes and gets X-rays the next day. But I was already scheduled to race that next weekend at Talladega in the Melling car, and it was
really,
yeah,
the Cup race.
Yeah, was it number 92? Isn't that right? Yeah, I think it had Melling was the sponsor. I think Stacy Compton was the driver.
Yeah. Kodiak maybe sponsor.
I don't remember, but Steve Plattenberger was the crew chief, and Chad Knaus had been there like the year before, prior to moving over and doing Jimmy's deal. And if you went back and looked at the record books, that car sat on the pole at most of those speedway races because they had something with the truck arms all cheated up that they could get through tech. And so I knew this, and I was pretty excited to get to run Talladega because in the Busch Series, those speedway races were some of my best. Like I was good at that type of racing.
But you were scared of those tracks.
Yeah, right. But I had a good seat. That's why I wasn't. Yeah. And so I was like, man, to get to be in a car that's going to be super fast, like this is a great opportunity. And I think Haviland was actually going to be the sponsor, and Chip was doing that. I mean, you remember that's how it worked back then. Like, if you were going to run Cup, they'd put you. I think you could run 6 or 7 races the year before, so you didn't lose your rookie status. And it was like every driver at that time. Jimmy did it with Hendrick Motorsports. Ryan Newman did it with Penske. Like, they all ran 6 or 7 races the year before, and so that's what I was going to do in the Melling car. And I don't remember if it was just Talladega. I think it was like quite a few races. So Andy Graves calls me on the Monday after Kansas and is like, hey, I need you to, come into the shop. We got to talk. I'm like, okay. And I don't think Chip was there. I think it was just Andy. And he was like, listen, he said, Sterling got in that wreck at Kansas. He went and did some x-rays the next day, and his neck is broken or it's fractured. And they have told him that if he races and he gets in another wreck, it could be really bad. And you got to remember, this is 18 months after Dale Earnhardt's died. So that's on everyone's mind. Like that was on everyone's mind for a while. And then also during that time, Jerry Nadeau was getting hurt. There were some other people getting severely hurt. So I think prior to Dale Sr.'s death, Sterling probably still races because everyone's invincible at the time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But because of the circumstances, Sterling they're taking Sterling out of the car. And they just were like, I think Chip said something to the effect of like, if I have enough faith or belief in you to put you in my car next year, then I want to put you in my car this year. The unique part of that, though, is that I believe up to Kansas, Sterling had led the points like the whole year.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a car. It was like the car that year. Like they were super fast at most racetracks. And I was pretty nervous. I mean, like I remember leaving the shop and again calling like my mom and dad and kind of telling them what was going to happen. And yeah, I was pretty nervous that, like, especially leading into Talladega, it was unbelievable, Rick, because I had spent my entire career up to this point, and this isn't saying anything negative on any other race team I drove for, but Mittler Brothers was not a top-tier truck series team. That TKO Motorsports was not a top-tier truck team. Bruco, great team. It was not a top-tier team. It was a B team compared to like Childress or Gibbs or, I mean, it's just how it was. It was not affiliated with a cup organization. And now, not only was I getting in a good car, but I was getting in the car that was leading the. I mean, it was just, yeah, it was a great situation. But those can go both ways. You can get in those and fail, and then people never believe in you again, or you get in that and you do well, and it buys you some time.